right, and I think we can get started. My name is Robert Watson, and this is the first Sitecore Meetup that I wanted to start here in the Madrid area, and wanted to say welcome to everyone that joined. And for those of you who could not make it, I am going to be recording this meeting, so you can view it later, and I'll post a link to everyone out who joined virtually and on my LinkedIn as well. So yeah, with that, welcome. This first meetup, I'm going to be presenting building dynamic wildcard pages within Sitecore and XM Cloud. And basically what I mean by wildcard, I mean by creating dynamic pages and page routes to be able to funnel dynamic content and publish pages through Sitecore using a scheme that they have for wildcards and how that can be used within React.js and how basically those can be used to funnel any content through any of the components and the lifecycle in there. So I spent a lot of time creating wildcards in in standard Sitecore XP and wanted to take the opportunity to learn how it's done on the React side. So I wanted to bring that information on over out there into the Sitecore network. So basically, to start off, my name is Robert Watson, and I'll go ahead and share my screen right now. So I am a lead full stack developer, and I've worked with Sitecore for about 11 years now. Worked from a junior dev on up to working with various teams and leading some for a few projects now, and worked all the way from Sitecore 7.2, starting off with ATP World Tour, and then working on version 8, 8.2, 9, 9.3, 10.1, and XM Cloud. So I currently in working on various projects, a few redesigns here and there, and some maintenance projects. And I didn't put my LinkedIn in there, but you can find me at rmwatson5 as my LinkedIn handle, which I'll post later. And I wanted to do a quick sponsorship. Thank you for Tidal Wave Media for making this possible. Tidal Wave Media is a digital agency that is based in Spain, and they provide classes and training for any Sitecore products, audits, maintenance, and redesigns and migrations in the Spain and Madrid area. So thank you to Tidal Wave Media. And I kind of wanted to give a little bit of the overall agenda of what I'm going to be talking about, and I'll try to pause every time for questions. So feel free to pause me or just let me know if you're a little confused on some of the things. I do tend to talk a little fast, so I just wanted to, take the time to be able to answer anyone's questions there.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, so basically, kind of want to talk about the purpose of why wildcards, why creating dynamic content, why setting up like a dynamic route. I'll go through Sitecore to kind of show a little bit about what I mean with wildcards in there, and then I'm going to go through creating a dynamic sitemap to based off of those wildcards and how those can be used for like crawling or SEO purposes, and how that builds into the native XM Cloud sitemap generator and how you can override that to add in your custom routes. I'm going to provide a live demo throughout the project to show you the kind of like an end-to-end working project of this. and then just kind of do a wrap up and then Q&A. If there's any questions starting off, feel free to ask away. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so yeah, like I said, why wildcards? You want kind of to build, say, like a dynamic route. So I have my XM Cloud instance right here, which I'll go ahead and share. So let me do that for here. So basically, you want to um, build a dynamic route. Let's say, for an example, you're building out a commerce site and your commerce products are hosted elsewhere and they're probably on a different platform. They could be on Order Cloud. They could be on Dynamics Commerce. They could be Commerce Stack, anywhere. And basically, you want to be able to fetch that data and be able to funnel it through your page lifecycle. You want to build out a route based on the most up-to-date data, and that content isn't necessarily hosted within Sitecore. So basically, when you build out a wildcard for your page within Sitecore, you essentially start off with figuring out your route, and then you'll put in essentially an asterisk that you would have within your site. So, for an example, in this case, you have shop as your program or your product listing page, which would list all of the products that would be available, for an example, and then you have your product detail page, and then that asterisk signifies that that would be the name of the item that you are navigating to, and then you want to figure out a dynamic way to figure out if that product actually exists, and so you're pulling in from an external feed, and you want to 404 the user in case that product doesn't exist. Like, let's say the URL was fudge, or maybe even a 404 attack on your page to nuke your SEO purposes. So I have ways of handling that, which I'll provide in the demo. And on top of that, during the page lifecycle, I grab information on that product and store it in the page and send it throughout which can be accessed on the components. And I'm using, for this demo purposes, I'm using Content SDK, which is Sitecore's latest building roadmap or platform that they use for building out React sites. So I'm going to start off by showing the sitemap. And so basically, if I want to build out like a custom sitemap like we have here, so here you can essentially see how it's kind of built out and structured. And so sitemaps can essentially, come in two forms, where if it's a large enough sitemap, you essentially have your base sitemap page, where essentially that's the index, and that will show you, or that'll give you the links to where all of the other sitemaps are. So that is typically configured within your SXA site within XM Cloud, where if you have your sitemap configured in here, you have a whole list of settings. And for demo purposes, I set this particular field right here of the maximum number of pages that I would want per sitemap. And so I set it to 1 to demonstrate the sitemap index and all of the different how basically XM Cloud will, and currently now Sitecore AI will generate out that list of sitemaps and the links in there. So each sitemap that I have in here will essentially be a link to another, sitemap. So this will just show one of the pages. So if I go to the next one, then I will, it'll go to the next one. and so on and so forth. And so I'm going to show basically how I'm driving that, how I'm overriding the sitemap provider that Sitecore uses within the Next.js site that they have. But before that, are there any questions on how the sitemap works and kind of how Sitecore drives that?
Sorry, are you asking?
Yeah, if you have any questions on basically how the
Ah,
sitemap works or
ah, no, it's clear for now. Thank you.
okay. So yeah, typically it's configured automatically inside of the site right here for the sitemap media, and you can configure like how many sitemaps you want. Um, but this is usually automatically driven whenever you configure the amount of sitemaps that you have, and within each individual page, you'll typically have a sitemap section, so you could say if you even want to include it in the sitemap or not. So in fact, this part should probably be set to do not include because you don't want the actual asterisk to be written within the sitemap because you don't want crawlers to pick that up. And then there's typically a setting within the project for the sitemaps where they're physically stored inside of a media, so it will be picked up that way. So if I pull up, for an example, the content SDK um, project that Sitecore Cloud or that Sitecore provides, then you can actually see within their Sitecore client class that they have here, which essentially drives most of the content SDK like functionality and how things are basically being pulled. So this is kind of like the mothership, so to speak, of the driver of a lot of functionality within the Sitecore site. So you have your get sitemap function that exists in here, and basically what happens is you have your sitemap service, and then you're trying to pull it in, and a lot of the times it's not pulled in by the ID. The ID comes in from the request URL, and it's typically used for multi-level sitemaps. So if you see right here, you'll have that the ID is present in the URL via sitemap-n. So n being the ID of the sitemap. So that's essentially how I'm driving that factor in here with the ID and all of the different sitemaps. So you essentially get the sitemap path, and you fetch it from your XM Cloud instance, and then it will pull that out and then return that to the user. So this is typically sent as a API path. So it would be sent as / sitemap, and then this get sitemap function gets called and then returns the sitemap. However, if there are multiple sitemaps that are found, then it will create the sitemap index within here. So what I did in here is I overrode how that works because I want to be able to put in different sitemaps. So I am always returning a sitemap index whenever sitemap.xml is called. And therefore, I'm able to put in custom sitemaps that I have. So I have sitemaps products, for an example, where the product URLs wouldn't necessarily be able to be retrieved out of the box with Sitecore. So if I dynamically created my own sitemap from the sitemap products, then I'll find a list of products that I have from my API feed that I am calling. So this will essentially show a list of links, and if there's more than one or more than a certain amount of products, you can have several sitemaps for your shop, or you just have like a giant list of all the products in there. So moving on a little bit, as I have these sitemap products, I'm essentially building it out in this way where I'm able to pull out the ID from that URL. So if you remember that -n where it recognized the ID in there, that's kind of why I built out the sitemap like this. So essentially, I'm building out products and then building out my custom sitemap that way. So I created my own custom Sitecore client to be used throughout the site. And inside there, I overrode the get sitemap method. So basically, I am starting off by pulling out the ID from the URL. And so I basically want to check if the if the ID is null, meaning that I am just basically hitting the direct sitemap.xml, then I want to return the actual sitemap index, what you're seeing on the screen on the right. So if I have this build sitemap right here, I want to essentially get the existing sitemap links that exist within Sitecore, and then I want to add in these two custom ones that I have right here. So basically, I have the build sitemap links, and then I want to get all of the sitemaps that exist. So if there's only one, then I'm only going to return the first sitemap iteration. So basically, it would be sitemap-0 in this case, where it would just grab the first sitemap. So I put in this main right here to make a note in here that if I am calling one of the main sitemaps that Sitecore generates, then I am parsing that, and I am doing a fetch directly into Sitecore to grab out the sitemap from there. And so within the index, I have the sitemap products, which I'm returning. So if I am calling sitemap products, so if I'm hitting this URL right here, then I want to generate the list of all of the products that I have. So what I do is I have this build custom sitemap links function in here, meaning that if the if the ID was not null and it does not include main, so it's not one of the main Sitecore links, and then I want to say, okay, maybe it's a custom sitemap. So I'm going to call this custom function that I made and see which one it is. So in this case, this is the build product sitemap. And so I have the custom, or I have the XML formatting for the sitemap that I'm trying to return. And I have the blog sitemap that I'm creating right here, where essentially I'm doing a GraphQL call to get all of the blogs from the sitemap, or I'm sorry, from Sitecore, and then I generate the URLs that way. But for products, and I wanted to simulate an actual API call from to an external feed to bring these products back, and where I essentially just want to get a list of all the product names that I would be putting in the URL. So I have this call product API, and I am making this call into here to get a list of all of the products. And this can be flattened or made however it needs to be, depending on the person's needs. So I set up like a custom Axios call to get the sitemap call, and I have my own handler within the Pages API Commerce products where I'm mimicking the flow that Sitecore typically uses, or at least the Content SDK app that they use to handle API calls to the back end of this application. So if I go into here, into the products middleware that I have set up, then I am basically handling saying, okay, this is a GET request where I'm just getting the products. And so it's saying, okay, get all products. And then I'm essentially just returning the list of products within here. So for simulation purposes, I basically just set up products to essentially be a JSON right now. So it fetches all the product lists that I created in here from a demo list of the JSON that I have here. So for an example, you have the Aurora Bamboo desk lamp, which is set right here from the custom slug. And so this can, be modified or whatever it needs to be. However, this would typically be calling, a third-party source to get out these products. Are there any questions with the middleware or anything, or setting up any of the sitemaps with this? Or I know I kind of went through a few files, but if there's any questions, feel free to stop me.
Okay, the main idea I think is clear
Cool. Okay.
about. Mhm.
Awesome. And so let's go back a little bit then to where we have the build sitemap. So that's being returned and that is being sent out through the build custom sitemap link. So after the product links are sent back, I basically just have this string array and I'm essentially mapping it to /shop with the slug, which writes out the sitemap that you have here. And then for the sitemap, I have the URL index or the URL set, and then just render through all of the different products with the segment in there. Cool. So basically, that's how I overrode the custom or the sitemap that Sitecore has with from their content SDK. And it's pretty easy, relatively speaking, to override their custom Sitecore client class that they have. So if I go into find references, then when you download the Sitecore SDK starter pack, you'll get this Sitecore client that exists under lib, and you can essentially just return your own custom um, Sitecore client right there. So that way it makes it like really easy for you when any of the custom functions are called or anything. So moving on a little bit, I want to do a quick time check. So, all right. So now that we have the custom sitemaps made, you can essentially send that off to whatever crawling service. In a lot of cases, I've used Coveo for crawling dynamic content for search. So that way, Coveo knows where to go for crawling your web pages and crawling all the data within those pages. So it should be able to easily get all of the pages for your site. And so when Coveo hits your sitemap index and it goes into here, it's got to know, it knows that this is an actual link to a web page. So it's going to try to hit that page and then it'll come up to something like this. So let's hit that Aurora Bamboo desk lamp for an example. So you obviously, you want this to be an actual web page that hits. However, it doesn't necessarily exist, so to speak, within Sitecore. you want to be able to pull in the page data from this, for an example. So you probably have, um, a layout in here. You probably have, um, some controls, basically that should be able to pull in the product context and then use that as a rendering in the site. So maybe you have like your images, like a little slideshow. I try to simplify this as much as possible, where I basically just pull in the product name, the SKU, the price, and everything. And so all of these links should be working, and it'll pull out like um, a different URL depending on what's in there. So if I go back to the sitemap products, I can go to like Bluetooth speaker for an example, then that page should render with all of that product's data. So I'm going to go through now basically how that is done. So if I go back into the Sitecore client that I have on the left-hand side, I have this get page function, which I'm overriding from the Sitecore SDK. So if we go take a look at that real quick, we can see let me close that. So let's go to the get page. So this is the get page function that is within Content SDK. And basically the driving force of this, you could think of this as the item resolver with that Sitecore has for their XP, where and that exists in one of the processors within their site or their self-hosted solution, like in 10.3 for an example, where you have the pipeline, um, it's like get item or something like that, and then there's the item resolver part, where essentially it takes the URL and tries to match it to a Sitecore item. So it'll take the path that you have in here from that came in from the URL, and it will make an attempt to locate the actual Sitecore item that exists in here. So if I go down into here, it'll get the layout and everything. It'll check to see if what the route is, and it'll get the layout data. So a crucial step for um, the wildcard setup is we need to make sure that this page can actually render, and it's not just going to hit a random, or we're not just going to like 404, because if you put in any random URL, then Sitecore will reject it. So we want to make sure that if it starts with shop, then we want to be able to get the next part of that string, and then search for a product with that string. So basically what I do is I split apart the path in the get path here, and I get the slug that exists from it. So as we're going through in this custom Sitecore client, and I hit Horizon Bluetooth speaker, I am essentially doing a check where I'm saying, okay, I do have a slug in here. If not, then we're assuming that they're on the shop landing page. And so that's where we're going to essentially send them. So I'm just calling the parent function that exists that I just showed earlier. But in this case, we do have a product slug. So we want to call that product API, and we want to get a product by that name. And so we send in the product slug and try to get a product. And if that product doesn't exist, meaning if I just have a random URL, then I'm going to 404 the user. So that's essentially what would happen in that case. So after I have that specific Bluetooth speaker, then I know I got a product. Now I need to get the product detail page that is associated with Sitecore. So basically, I need to go ahead and grab this basic page because I need the layout from it. And then I want to add my own custom data to that Sitecore page so I can pull it out in the components. So I have the product detail page. And obviously, if I can't fetch that, then I just return null. But if I do, which in this case I do, I am setting this part in the layout detail called the client data. And basically what that is it's a custom field that we can add items into that exist throughout the rest of the page lifecycle. So in this case, I am saying, okay, we have the product that exists. We have the product page that exists in Sitecore. So that has been located. Now we need to add the product detail to this client data so that we can fetch it within our components within Sitecore. So what I do right here is I set up a little constant variable in the client data and then just send the product there. And then if I go through any of the components for an example, such as this product details, you can see in the final layout, I have this product example, and that is essentially calling the product example component right here. So inside of here, I need to fetch out the product details by getting the Sitecore page that exists and say, okay, I need to get the product detail from the client data that I put in earlier in the Sitecore client. And obviously, if that doesn't exist, then we want to return out of that that function in there. So if it does, then we want to get out the product details and then just do any necessary formatting that we have. So that's essentially how I'm able to pull that within here. And so this can exist within any number of components that we have that will pull out the current context of that product. And you could even take this a step further, create your own custom React hook. So that way you don't have to write this in every single component. You could just say use current product and then just get your product out that way. And then you can leverage it within there to make things a little bit easier on yourself. And then just put all of that logic within that custom hook. But yeah, that's generally it for that overall process in getting the page data and adding the custom product that you return and then putting that in there. So you can essentially just go back through into the sitemap and then just pull out any product that you need, and then it'll render out all the necessary data that exists on the page. Are there any questions?
No, only one, because this example is to generate the page on the fly, right? That we say. So if we would like to do it in the server side, for example, to create the pages during the building or something like that, it could be possible, or is another example maybe?
Yeah, so basically, it's, in a sense, I would say that these pages are in a way like custom, but are you talking about adding in like custom renderings um, per page?
Yeah, I'm afraid because maybe we can get 500 products, for example, and if we have a lot of clients accessing to the site at this
Mhm.
same moment, it could be a problem to the performance, maybe. That's
Yeah,
the
for
reason to
sure.
generate the pages before in another
Yeah,
moment.
so what I would suggest in that kind of scenario, and that's a totally realistic scenario, honestly, because like that would definitely happen, And for demo purposes, I didn't set that part up, but what I would do in that case is when you are in the Sitecore client and you're trying to actually fetch the product by name, what I would do is I would go ahead and in this call, I would set up caching within that call, and there's a series of options that you could have to set up caching. One would be a good way, and what ties in very easily with Vercel is using Redis caching. So that way you can call the Redis provider to see if a product exists by that name and then pull that out, because that's going to be the crux of what slows down that portion of rendering out the page, because you already have essentially all the page and all its renderings right here. You just need to get the details for the product, because the only thing that's going to be different per product detail page is going to be the product name itself and all the details. So, so all of the renderings that exist within in this specific scenario for this wildcard is going to be that um, that specific product itself. But yeah, all of the renderings on here exist and is pulled out the same way of how the existing content SDK does it. But yeah, I would definitely suggest in a production ready environment to set up some sort of caching for this specific call right here. But this is actually calling the backend. So inside the backend, that's where I would set up the Redis caching. So if I go into API Commerce and then you go into that handler that I showed earlier, then down here where you search the product by name, or when you're getting any of the products, this is definitely where um, you should set up the caching to be able to make this a lot more performant.
Great. I get it, I think. I need to
Nice.
practice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. And one other thing, and I haven't written this out yet, but I've come across like another scenario where I've had to um, basically use information that existed on, and it wouldn't necessarily be the case within this specific product details or within this specific wildcard setup, but for a different wildcard setup where you have like blogs, for an example, where the each individual page does exist in here, and you want to render it out, but without all of these different numbers in here. So you don't want that in the URL. So you just want it to be blogs / blog page A. Then you would essentially, inside the Sitecore client for the get page, you'd have a separate one for getting the blogs. Basically, the difference between that is instead of making an API call to like a third-party source to get the products, you already have all this data within Sitecore. So what would be the preferred route is to make a GraphQL call to search for that blog page and then return that out. And yes, you could also cache that as well, where you are linking that exact product to a specific path within Sitecore. So if that's cached, then you could say, okay, I got blog page A, then I need the Sitecore route to that. And so if it exists in the cache, then it'll return that specific route. So in here, you just return super.getPage for that blog to render it. And then that would be a custom page per within that wildcard setup. So it'd be slightly different. And if you need to pull out any specific data to be put onto the page, then or if you need it within like the metadata, for an example, I had a scenario where I needed to grab the hero image that existed on a blog. And so that was on a specific data source. So I didn't want to drill into the page itself to get that. So I kind of did a reverse scenario where if you create your get static props within the component level, that gets called before the page lifecycle. And then you could essentially set that into the client data and then render that onto the page. So if you, and so Coveo, for an example, maybe Sitecore Search would be able to pull out this stuff from the metadata and use that for its indexing when you have your search provider. So if I am on, for an example, the layout, and you want to render some of the meta links and create some sort of like custom meta tags based on the page, then you can do so by creating a custom um, um, rendering within here. And then I have this get page metadata. So I'm saying, okay, if you're a blog page or if you're a product page, then I want to get the product detail metadata. And so you can basically just add whatever metadata you need in here, and then it will render out onto the page. So it'll actually show the metadata of like the product directly in here. And I don't have any custom meta tags. Well, actually, no, I do. I have template image, thumbnail image URL or ID. So that way you can tell your custom search provider to crawl that. And then that way that will be set on the custom index. So when you do a search, you can facet those searches to be able to search through those custom fields. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with setting up wildcards and custom data and driving that to kind of get around any of the existing issues that happen um, with anything that doesn't necessarily provide from Sitecore out of the box, and kind of how to customize that. And they make it really easy to customize it for sure with the Sitecore client class that they have.
Good.
Cool. All right. Yeah, that's about it that I have for now. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer later. I'll make a posting of this so anyone can come and see it. And uh, yeah, happy to answer anything. And want to say thank you for your time. And
Thank you. Too.